My name is Tisha Smith, and I'm your reader today. And my glasses. Oh, good. Thank you. That's so good. Did not like the platform much at all. Okay, so our theme for today is It's a New Day. Our theme for 2024 is a grand rising. And guess what tomorrow is? Tomorrow is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It always sneaks up on us, doesn't it? I never know when it's coming. I do not know him personally, but I think that we probably embody most about him, many things about his consciousness. He spoke about consciousness, Martin Luther King Jr. did, and he spoke about social change, and his speaking about social change continues to take place even today. And he said to us, he said, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great of a burden to bear. That is for sure. And then we have a book, a recommended book for reading this month. And I didn't know we had recommended books. And this recommended book is by Dr. Sean Ginwright, and he or she wrote The Four Pivots, Re-Imaging Justice and Re-Imaging Ourselves. And he says in this book, the most important aspect of social change is not problem analysis, it's not power building, narrative change, or coalition building, it's healing. Healing is the only pathway to real justice, to restore our humanity, and finally to move us confidently into a possible future. So now let us use this creative power that we all have, our words, to affirm together. On this new day, I believe that as we rise in spirit, anything is possible. Yay. Okay, so now we're going to introduce Dr. Reverend Kathleen Johnson. Let's breathe.
Yeah, and let's come into that energy of this theme for the year and for the month. So I'm going to say to you, Grand Rising. Grand Rising. I'm going to do it again, and let's hear it with more enthusiasm. Okay? Grand Rising. Yes. So let's remember that when we do that, and when we greet each other that way this year and beyond, that we are making a statement, a really powerful statement, that I am here to rise into my full divine nature, here and now in this moment, to be that love, that peace, that joy, that intelligence, that wisdom, that I am in truth. And I'm inviting you to join me, right? I mean, this is not just about me, it's about all of us. So during the 3 years of the pandemic social distancing, we had a lot of time to reflect, didn't we? Reflect on what is our vision for our lives, for our planet. Time to reflect on then, okay, how do I line up with that? What habit patterns in thought and behavior are not serving me and lining up with this greater vision. And so it's this year of the Grand Rising, is an opportunity to recommit to our resolve to evolve in consciousness, which means to step more fully into the fullness of the divine nature that we are in truth. So can you feel the excitement building? I can. And know that it's not only happening here in this community, it is happening in Centers for Spiritual Living and other New Thought communities and actually other faith communities all over the planet. There is this greater recognition that something more is being called forth from all of us in order to truly transform the so-called issues or conditions on the planet that have been causing a lot of suffering in humanity. And actually, it's not just the conditions, it's the state of consciousness, it's the mind. And what I love is that we are clear stands for that clear understanding that if we are to truly heal or reveal something different on the planet, that it begins within each and every one of us. I love this quote by Ernest Holmes, which is a real clarity about what grand rising in consciousness entails. He uses the term born of the Spirit or one with God or, union with God. But he begins by saying, we cannot be born of the Spirit unless we do the will of the Spirit. And this is the cool thing. Some people get this idea of will confused. The will of the Spirit is always the same as the nature of the Spirit. So the will of the Spirit is goodness, peace, mercy, justice, and truth. Love, you can go on and on, all these qualities of the Spirit. He said it is conscious union with God. It's understanding that all that's going on here is the activity of God, the nature of God. We are individualizations of God. And as such, we are gifted with the powers of creation and freedom of choice. And that's why you see such a variety of ways in which people show up on the planet. And yet I know that there's this impulse within us. It's the divinity within us that is calling us to a higher place, a newer version of ourselves. And that's what we're focused on, not only today, but this entire year. And here's the thing, while so many of us choose to show up as love in all of our relationships, it's also important to understand and also to be the instruments of this peace, this joy, this justice, and so on. We almost realize that we are immersed in a collective consciousness, or what Ernest Holmes called human race consciousness. I'm going to use the term human so that you understand that's what he's talking about. And therefore, quite likely, there are some beliefs of unconscious bias and other deeply held beliefs that block the flow of love, particularly when we're triggered, when those beliefs are triggered. So leading from love then means being willing to see those uncomfortable beliefs so that we can shine the light on them with truth, neutralize them, and reveal a greater expression of who we are. So Ernest Holmes uses the term, there's really no healing, there's really nothing to be healed, there's just truth to be revealed. It's just a reminder that as we shed those beliefs, the truth of who we already are, that shining, radiant light within, is bursting forth, is ready to burst forth into magnificent expression. As a big contributor to the Grand Rising in consciousness, Dr. Sean Gin Wright, who is the author of The Four Pivots, has gotten a lot of media attention, which is really good. And they also had a seminar with him online through the Centers for Spiritual Living. He actually is a member of one of the Centers for Spiritual Living. And so after years of trying to change the social justice system by fighting against it, we know what happens when you fight against something. What happens? It grows in, yes. And so he finally understood that his approach was not working, and it was also leading to mental, emotional, and physical burnout. And so he had to admit to himself that it wasn't working, and he had to find another way. And that's when he began to discover this approach of living in possibility. What is the vision that's drawing me forward? And he got much clearer on the vision. I'll be talking more about that next week. And it actually lined up with Martin Luther King's beloved community idea. I have a dream, how we all live together in harmony and peace. And he also realized that in order to line up with that he had some inner work to do, some inner reflection. He calls it reflection. And he has a bunch of reflective questions to ask yourself in order to line up with that vision. And so he puts, what I love is he puts it in layman's terms so that anyone can read it and gain great good from it. So let's take a look then at this thing called beloved community and the architect of that idea, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He lived an extraordinary life. We all understand that. Listen to this. At 33, he was pressing the case of civil rights with President John Kennedy. I get God bumps when I think about that. That's young. At 34, he galvanized the nation with his I Have a Dream speech. 34. Yeah. At 35, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm getting God bumps as I'm thinking about it. At 39, he was assassinated, which shook the nation. And yet, he left a legacy of hope and inspiration that continues today. So this week, as we honor Martin Luther King Jr. and the cultural movement that he inspired, which is equality, freedom, and justice for all, understanding that it was rooted in spiritual truth, it was rooted in love. And you saw from that beautiful quote, hate is too great a burden to bear. Love was his choice. And I was thinking about that and contemplating that in my own life and how I get triggered by certain things, and remembering the power of continually realigning with love, the beloved community. I'd also like to acknowledge those in this day and age who carry on his work in one form or another of social justice. And so I want to acknowledge our own organization, the greater organization Centers for Spiritual Living, that does trainings that actually has a social justice committee. It has a big broader name than that, but they have that, but also are committed to social justice and to raising consciousness of humanity in order to align with that vision of beloved community. So I want to acknowledge Centers for Spiritual Living. I'd love to acknowledge all of us individual centers for spiritual living that are all over the planet. There's some 400 of communities like us that are all over the planet. And I would also like to acknowledge the leaders in our community, Virgie Cooper, who leads the Social Justice Initiative Ministry. And we see evidence of it in our newsletters every week. And we've had gatherings, and there's now a book reading, social justice book reading group that's coming up as well. And so I'd like to honor Virgie, and I'd like to honor Candace, who is the leader champion, who's been supporting Virgie as well, and all of those who participated in that social justice ministry in our community. Let's give a round of applause. And though gender and racial equality was never explicitly discussed in the Science of Mind text by Ernest Holmes, he was a clear advocate of it, of gender and racial equality. And anybody read the story in the newsletter this week that I offered, and it was about Ernest Holmes' experience in the early years, actually in the early years of way back in 1945, when one of his staff in the Science of Mind magazine pulled out the Third Church of Religious Science, which was predominantly Afro-American, and put it in a separate category called colored. And when Ernest Holmes found out about it, I can imagine the horror. And he made them correct it, and then he went and he spoke at that church. And I'm going to quote him. This is what he said. He said, "We are all children of one living God, one God that permeates all without exception, one intelligence that governs all, and most important, every man and woman who abides in the universe is a significant entity in the one universal consciousness. Our doors will forever be open to all. Whoever you are, be proud. You are a divine idea in the mind of God." Whoever you are, be proud. Right? You are an idea in the mind of God, a divine idea. He also had a very close relationship with Reverend Pearl Wood, known as Mother Pearl of the Triangular Church of Los Angeles, which is now called Triangular Center for Spiritual Living, which is a predominantly African American center led by a woman. And he has encouraged the women stepping into ministry as well as people of color. And so he stands as a powerful example of the legacy of Martin Luther King before Martin Luther King showed up. And we continue to carry that on to align with that. So it's a new day, a time to do our inner work, revealing our spiritual truth so that we may carry on that work, that great work of love of the beloved community, with faith, with courage, and with action. I wanted to just do a brief summary of the 4 pivots, and I'm going to talk about 2 of them today and then the other 2 next week. But they are awareness, connection, vision, and presence. And the thing that he makes very clear, that Dr. Jen Wright makes very clear, is that it doesn't mean that you don't take action for social justice. What he's saying, though, is the key is to do the inner work, because otherwise, if we come from a wounded consciousness, we can't be fully expressed in our leadership or what we're bringing forth. So he's actually saying both, but he's saying do not neglect, because this is really key. The consciousness is really key to confidently moving into a possible future. So the first pivot, which is awareness, is a pivot from what he calls lens, which is analysis, looking outward, analysis, power building, coalition building, etc., to mirror. And we know what it means to how life is a mirror, to mirror work, which means looking within and what is going on within me that is standing in the way of greater love being expressed on the planet. And then from that expanded point, what he's done is he's gone out and he now works with people, with police officers, doing trainings on diversity inclusion, but also the deep inner work. He also works with young black males in gangs, who hang out in gangs, works with them to help them with the transformation of consciousness. He's become very clear that this deep inner work of moving beyond what is holding us back is what is going to truly transform everything. This is what we've been teaching all along, isn't it? It's so great to see it showing up on a broader scale. So this also doesn't mean that we don't look at or face the big challenges in the world. And a great example is we don't want to discount the need to rise in awareness of social justice issues like mass incarceration. And I was reading in Martin Luther King's time, 188,000 people were incarcerated when he was, back in those days of Martin Luther King. Today, instead of 188,000, there are approximately 2 million people incarcerated in this country. And the United States imprisons a larger percentage of black people than South Africa did at the height of apartheid. No other country in the world imprisons so many of its racial minorities. So we face these conditions, right? We don't put our heads and pretend like they're not there. And then we do the inner work that's necessary to do our part in transforming it. The transformation comes from within outward. It's really important to remember that. Because we found that just going and trying to fix the condition, we've learned this, just fixing the condition, if the consciousness is not changed, it continues to pop up in new forms or the same thing. So I know, and I'm so grateful that Dr. Jin Wright is on the right path of doing the kind of work that he does. So that's awareness. From lens, looking outward, trying to fix the condition, to mirror, doing the inner work so that when we do take action, it's inspired action and it's pulled by vision. Connection is the next one I want to talk about today. It's the pivot from transactional relationships. Now think about a transaction. It's like treating other people like a commodity. It's moving beyond that surface transactional relationship to transformational relationship, deep, heart-centered relationship where we're supporting each other's growth and unfoldment. And so the transformational relationships then, what do? If they're heart-centered, they build relationships, they build community, they build collective care, they build a sense of belonging and compassion. So I'd like to illustrate that, how we can apply that practically in this day and age. So this is just the way it is, okay? In countries around the world, there has always been progressives and conservatives. Progressives who want change, and conservatives who love tradition and really don't want the change. It's been like this forever. If you want to think about it, it's a great example of the yin-yang aspect of life and the way in which creativity takes place when there's contrast, right? Yet recently, so the idea is that there's room for all of us and that there's some sort of divine design behind it. Yet the divisiveness seems to have gotten out of control because it's been fueled by, let's just say it's been fueled by a perception that creates this us and them type idea. Instead of we're all in this together, we just have different approaches to life. So how do we coexist peacefully then, right? I mean, that's the big question. We cultivate relationships. I have to say my husband Dan is very good at that. He has friends who are progressives and he has friends who are conservatives, and he has a very skilled way of communicating with them. And so that's the call. The call is to cultivate relationships with those who think differently than we do. And Dr. Gin Wright, has cultivated these relationships, like I mentioned, with police. And he even talks about the police who have gotten away with not being held accountable for the crimes that they've committed against the black community. He's working at cultivating relationships with everyone. So that's connection, the importance of connection. The last two, vision, which is a shift from problem fixing to possibility creating, and then presence, which is moving from addiction to overwork to gentle, calmer, more productive flow states. That's next week. So we'll go into that a little bit more next week. So I'd like to conclude with this truth that we teach over and over and over again. Love is another synonym of God. God is love. So every person, every interaction that we have is an opportunity to express that love. It's a holy encounter. With every moment of discomfort and discontent, the energy of love is available to us. And that's what Martin Luther King reminded us, that what is really important is when we're and Ernest Holmes, when we're in a place of challenge and struggle and conflict, that's the time when it's really important for us especially to remember to choose love. So choosing love is how we tap into that energy that transforms social injustice and struggle. As spiritual beings, our job is not to simply pray for someone's highest and best. We are taught treat and move your feet. Or pray and move your feet. It's about looking within ourselves for the lessons, the gifts, the wisdom that are present for us. People who irritate us and moments that challenge us serve as invitations to go within and shift to love. So a grand rising then is what? It's all about choosing love. So let's turn within. So in the glory, the presence, the light, and the life of this one infinite universal source of all that is, the life of God, in which we live, move, and have our being. That life that is our life, there's no separation. In this moment of awakening and awareness, this moment of deep connection to Source within us, I know that we are automatically lining up to build rich, deep, transformational relationships with one another. I know that we are able then to live from a place of inspiration as we move through our day, guided into right action, time after time after time, showing up as love, choosing love over and over and over again, especially when we notice that we're triggered. And so I give my thanks for just the love and the beauty and the grace and the glory of God that is present in this spiritual community. how blessed we are to have each other. Just feeling that love, sweetness of it, breathing it. And then consciously, with a heart full of gratefulness, releasing this word to the action of the creative medium of divine mind, the energy that surrounds us, understanding that the law must respond to our word said in faith. And I say this in absolute faith and trust that it is done. And I invite us to accept it with a powerful yes! And so it is. Thank you, my friends. And Sharon, let's welcome Sharon.